The disappearance of Clarence Biddle, a quiet vanishing. On the early morning of October 12, 2012, in Susquehanna County, Pennsylvania, 42-year-old Clarence Biddle left his home just after 5 a.m. He was a journeyman electrician with nearly 20 years of experience, mostly working contract jobs at various power plants across the region. That Friday, he told his wife, Reba, that he was heading north to the Poconos for a solo weekend hunting, a tradition he had faithfully kept almost every year since his mid-20s. According to Reba, this was nothing out of the ordinary. Clarence enjoyed the solitude of early fall, always took the same silver 1999 Ford F-150, and followed the same routine. He loaded up his gear, locked the backyard shed, and drove off without incident. That morning seemed no different, except it would be the last time Clarence Biddle was ever seen alive. Reba, then 38, told investigators her husband had planned to return no later than Sunday evening, October 14th. When he failed to show up or even call, by Monday morning, she contacted local authorities and filed a missing person report with the Susquehanna County Sheriff's Office. She explained that Clarence had been under considerable stress in recent months. He was dealing with uncertainty at work due to multiple layoffs at the Montour power plant, where he had been on a temporary contract. At first, authorities treated the case as a standard wilderness disappearance. Clarence had said he planned to camp near a state-managed game reserve close to Wemart, an area known for its dense woodlands and limited ranger presence. Search and rescue teams from several counties joined volunteer groups in combing through trailheads and popular hunting spots. Cadaver dogs were brought in, and aerial sweeps were conducted over the thick forest canopy. Still, there was no sign of Clarence or his vehicle. Thomas Ely, a local forest ranger, informed investigators that Clarence's license plate had not been recorded at the main entry gate to the game reserve. The reserve operated on a manual logbook system, where hunters were expected to write down their vehicle and contact information. Neither Clarence's name nor his truck's license plate appeared in the log. Even more troubling, wildlife cameras positioned along perimeter trails and remote fire roads failed to capture any image of his truck or Clarence himself. With no sightings, no physical evidence, and no activity on Clarence's credit cards or cell phone, the investigation gradually lost momentum. Weeks passed. Then, in early November 2012, about 3 weeks after his disappearance, Reba received a mysterious letter in the mail. The envelope was postmarked from Buffalo, New York. Inside was a brief, typed note. "I'm gone. I need peace. Don't look for me." There was no signature, but Reba was convinced the handwriting on the envelope was her husband's. She handed the letter over to the authorities immediately. In December 2012, based largely on the letter and the total lack of evidence suggesting foul play, investigators officially reclassified the case as a voluntary disappearance. There were no suspects. No charges were filed. No further search operations were planned. Clarence Biddle's case remained technically open, but effectively inactive. By May 2013, 7 months after he was last seen, Clarence's profile was quietly removed from a National Crime Information Center, NCIC, active missing persons registry. His Social Security number had shown no activity since the previous fall. None of his known bank accounts had been accessed. His credit cards remained unused. His phone remained disconnected. Even his union membership with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, IBW, was terminated due to non-payment of dues. It was as if Clarence Biddle had simply vanished, not just into the woods, but from society itself. No one knows for certain what happened to him. Some believe he started a new life. Others suspect something darker. But the truth, like Clarence, remains hidden. The vanishing of Clarence Biddle. What happened after? As time passed, public interest in Clarence Biddle's disappearance gradually faded. There were no candlelight vigils, no follow-up stories in the media, and certainly no attention from state or national news outlets. In the small rural community of Montrose, Pennsylvania, his absence became more of a quiet mystery, just a local man who had seemingly vanished into thin air. With no new information and no body ever recovered, Clarence Biddle's case eventually slipped into cold case status. Between late 2013 and early 2020, there were no significant developments. No new tips, no sightings, no renewed efforts by law enforcement to revisit the case. It took nearly 8 years and a chance traffic stop more than 200 miles away for the mystery to resurface in the public eye. Back in March 2013, just 6 months after Clarence disappeared, his wife Reba Biddle moved out of the couple's home in rural Susquehanna County and relocated to Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, approximately 40 miles south. Her move aligned with a job transfer from a clerical role at the Montrose County Clerk's office to a new administrative position with the Luzerne County Housing Authority. Reba sold the house she and Clarence had shared, citing financial difficulties, and rented a modest one-bedroom apartment near Wilkes-Barre South Side. That same month, she initiated a claim on Clarence's $60,000 term life insurance policy, which included a clause allowing for payout after 180 consecutive days of verified absence. By late April 2013, the policy had been paid in full. While Clarence's legal death had not been officially declared in court, the insurance company accepted the disappearance as a basis for payment, supported by documentation from local law enforcement. Reba used the insurance payout to settle outstanding household debts and reported the remaining balance as savings in her tax filings. Interestingly, she never applied for survivor benefits, nor did she file a petition for a legal death certificate. According to several neighbors from Miller Hill Road, Reba became noticeably more reclusive after Clarence went missing. One neighbor remembered how she began avoiding eye contact and stopped engaging in casual conversation altogether. After relocating to Wilkes-Barre, Reba started using her maiden name, Reba Holt, in informal settings, though she never legally changed her name or filed for divorce. At her new workplace, colleagues describe her as private and focused. According to multiple co-workers, she never spoke at length about Clarence and referred to him only as gone. In 2014, Reba entered a personal relationship with Randall Farrow, a former contractor from Luzerne County. Farrow had a minor criminal background, with charges for trespassing and misdemeanor property damage dating back to 2009, but no felony convictions. He had a spotty employment history, known for taking under-the-table handyman jobs, and public records indicate that he held no business license. By early 2015, Farrow had moved into Reba's apartment. Though no marriage license was ever issued, by 2016, he had listed her address as his primary residence on both state and federal tax documents. 2 years later, in 2018, Reba designated Randall as her emergency contact on employment forms and medical insurance paperwork. That same year, Reba initiated a loan refinancing process for a personal loan she had originally co-signed with Clarence back in 2009. As part of the refinancing requirements, the bank requested verification regarding Clarence's status. In response, Reba submitted a notarized affidavit stating that Clarence had ceased all contact and was presumed deceased due to a prolonged, unexplained absence. While she did not provide a formal death certificate, her documentation was sufficient to meet the bank's internal criteria for account closure. Clarence's remaining financial accounts, already inactive for years, were then flagged for permanent closure. Just like that, he vanished not only from his hometown and from his marriage, but from every traceable system that might confirm he ever existed at all. The break in the Clarence Biddle case, a truck, a lie, and a wallet. By early 2019, Clarence Biddle's credit profile was officially marked inactive. To the outside world, it was as if he no longer existed. The administrative processes that silently erased someone from society had done their job. His name was removed from databases, his bank accounts were frozen, and his social security number remained unused. For most, Clarence had become a closed chapter, but not for everyone. His younger sister, Lisa Biddle, never stopped searching for answers. A registered nurse living in Scranton, Lisa had long expressed deep doubts about the nature of her brother's disappearance. In a statement given to Pennsylvania State Police in 2020, she firmly stated that she did not believe Clarence would ever walk away from his life without explanation. To her, the letter that arrived in 2012 postmarked from Buffalo was either staged or coerced. From the moment Clarence vanished, Lisa made periodic inquiries to the Susquehanna County Sheriff's Office. Each time, she was met with the same answer: no updates, no progress. As years passed and her frustration deepened, Lisa took matters into her own hands. In 2019, she hired a private data tracing firm that specialized in locating dormant vehicle registrations and tracking legacy addresses. Her request was simple: find Clarence's truck, a silver 1999 Ford F-150 that had never been found. The firm launched a multi-state investigation, pulling records from vehicle identification number, VIN databases, impound lots, and regional registration systems across Pennsylvania, New York, and surrounding states. The results came back empty. There had been no registration activity linked to Clarence's truck since late 2012. That, however, would change in an unexpected and dramatic way. On the afternoon of May 27, 2020, nearly 8 years after Clarence disappeared, New York State troopers made a routine traffic stop just outside Jamestown, a city in Chautauqua County, roughly 100 miles south of the Canadian border. A gray Ford F-150 had been observed heading eastbound on Interstate 86 with expired Pennsylvania plates. The vehicle matched the exact make and model that Lisa had been searching for. The driver, a white male who appeared to be in his early 50s, was alone in the truck. When troopers approached, he was unable to provide a driver's license or any valid form of identification. He verbally identified himself as Daniel Marks, but failed to produce any supporting documents. Noting several inconsistencies in his story, officers requested a VIN check. What they discovered shocked everyone. The VIN on the truck's dashboard and door frame returned to none other than Clarence Biddle, a Pennsylvania resident listed as missing since 2012. The registration flag triggered an alert for a cold case out of Susquehanna County. Clarence's Ford F-150 had finally surfaced after nearly a decade. The man was arrested on suspicion of vehicle theft and false identification. He was taken into custody and transported to the Chautauqua County Sheriff's Office for further questioning. During the initial 48 hours, the man refused to speak. He wouldn't sign intake forms, identify any next of kin, or answer basic questions. A standard biometric scan was eventually conducted, and his real identity was revealed. He was Randall Farrow. Farrow, a former Luzerne County resident, was known to authorities. He had a minor criminal history, including charges for trespassing and property damage, but no active warrants. More importantly, he was known to have been closely associated with Reba Biddle, Clarence's wife. Once his identity was confirmed, Farrow immediately invoked his right to legal counsel and declined further interviews. Meanwhile, the truck was taken to a state police forensic impound facility. Though it had been repainted a muted gray, the VIN confirmed it was indeed Clarence's original silver 1999 Ford F-150. The license plates had been swapped with a set registered to a defunct trailer once owned by a deceased relative of Farrow. Investigators also noted that the vehicle's chassis had partially abraded serial numbers, an apparent attempt to obscure ownership. The odometer suggested limited use over the 8-year period. Forensic specialists conducted a sweep of the interior. Under the passenger seat, they discovered a brown leather wallet, aged but still intact. Inside were several personal items that unmistakably belonged to Clarence Biddle. A faded union card from IBW Local 1249, a photograph of Clarence and Reba dated 2009, and a gasoline receipt from a station in Binghamton, New York. For the first time in 8 years, Clarence's story was no longer silent. A break in the case. The hidden truth behind Clarence Biddle's disappearance. The timestamp on the gasoline receipt found in Clarence Biddle's wallet read October 13th, 2012, just one day after he was last seen departing for his annual solo hunting trip. The receipt placed Clarence, or at least his vehicle, near Binghamton, New York on that very date. It was the first concrete, physical link to Clarence since the day he disappeared. With this critical piece of evidence in hand, the New York State Police reached out to their counterparts in Pennsylvania. The Susquehanna County District Attorney's Office, along with the Pennsylvania State Police, was immediately briefed on the recovery of Clarence's truck and the identification of its driver, Randall Farrow. Given the suspicious nature of Clarence's original disappearance and the new forensic discoveries tied to the vehicle, law enforcement agencies across both states began joint coordination. Soon after, the Pennsylvania Attorney General's office officially reactivated Clarence Biddle's missing person case, now as part of a broader criminal investigation. A renewed search of relevant locations and records was launched. Among the items seized were financial documents, personal files, and a locked metal filing box, each of which would shed new light on the truth behind Clarence's disappearance. One set of findings stood out above the rest: multiple handwritten drafts of letters that bore striking resemblance to the note received by Clarence's wife, Reba, in November 2012. That letter, postmarked from Buffalo, had claimed Clarence had left to find peace and asked not to be searched for. For years, it was the only trace left behind. But now, several drafts of nearly identical notes were found, some bearing similar phrasing, some incomplete, and one marked with internal postal stamps from the Willsbar post office, not Buffalo. The implication was chilling. These drafts strongly suggested the note Reba received may have been fabricated, possibly to make Clarence's disappearance look voluntary. Investigators quickly submitted the documents for handwriting and ink analysis. Further examination of the recovered files led detectives to a small brass key labeled only with the word shed. It didn't take long for investigators to associate it with the backyard shed behind the former Biddle residence in Susquehanna County. The house had been sold in 2013, but when contacted, the current owners confirmed that the shed had not been significantly accessed or altered since they moved in. With the homeowner's permission, investigators returned to property to conduct a full search of the shed. It had remained mostly untouched over the years, dust-covered, weathered, and seemingly ordinary. But within minutes, officers noticed something unusual. A section of the back wall appeared to be newly paneled and secured only with wood screws. The Wilkes-Barre apartment where Reba had been living was also searched in early June 2020. There, law enforcement recovered the locked metal filing box from a bedroom storage closet. Inside were neatly organized folders containing insurance correspondence, financial documents, and a number of personal letters. Some of those letters were addressed to Lisa, believed to be Clarence's younger sister, and had never been mailed. The tone was somber and introspective, filled with references to closure, hard choices, and moving on, but none mentioned contact with Clarence or efforts to find him. The draft note that most closely resembled the original Buffalo letter read, "I'm gone. I need peace. Don't look for me." The language was nearly identical to what Reba had received 8 years earlier. However, the draft was incomplete and bore local post office sorting stamps inconsistent with the Buffalo origin. A partial envelope found nearby was postmarked in Luzerne County, casting further doubt on the original narrative. The growing inconsistencies, handwriting similarities, mismatched postmarks, and stage documentation suggested a deliberate attempt to create a false trail. The investigation now centered not just on Clarence's disappearance, but on the disturbing possibility of an orchestrated cover-up. As authorities turned back to the shed at the Biddle residence, the discovery of the loose panel raised immediate suspicion. With screwdrivers in hand, officers carefully removed a section of wall. What they would uncover next would change the course of the case, and Clarence Biddle's story forever. What lay behind the wall? The truth about Clarence Biddle's fate. Behind the loose panel in the backyard shed, investigators uncovered what they described as a concealed storage void, a hollow cavity large enough to hide a person or a sizable object. The floor of this hidden space was stained and discolored in a manner consistent with the presence of aged biological material. On the plywood base, there was a clear impression, roughly the shape of a tarp-wrapped rectangle. Forensic technicians conducted chemical luminol testing within the cavity and detected moderate levels of blood spatter along the rear wall. The site was immediately secured, and a crime scene evidence team collected multiple biological samples. Among the findings was a single strand of hair recovered from the floor, which was later confirmed through mitochondrial DNA analysis to belong to Clarence Biddle. Although degraded due to time and exposure, the blood residue also tested positive for human origin, with partial genetic markers matching the Biddle family profile. Following investigative protocol, the search was expanded to cover the perimeter of the property. Near the rear fence line, officers located a shallow grave. Inside was a rusted metal box containing several personal items later identified as belonging to Clarence: a valid Pennsylvania hunting license for the year 2013, a pair of heavily worn work boots, and a broken wristwatch. Strikingly, none of these items had been included in the original missing persons report. Reba Biddle had never reported them as missing or recovered, which immediately raised additional concerns for investigators. At this stage, law enforcement began to operate under a revised theory. Clarence Biddle never left home for the Poconos on October 12, 2012. Instead, evidence now suggested he had been killed that morning, either inside or near the shed behind his home, and that the narrative of a solo hunting trip and voluntary disappearance had been carefully fabricated. With mounting evidence, arrest warrants were issued on June 4, 2020. Reba Biddle was charged of conspiracy to commit fraud, destruction of evidence, and insurance fraud. Randall Farrow, who had been found in possession of Clarence's truck, was charged with unauthorized use of a motor vehicle, tampering with physical evidence, and obstruction of justice. Both suspects were taken into custody without incident and arraigned before the Luzerne County Court of Common Pleas. Bail for Reba was denied due to the severity of the charges and concerns about her potential to flee. Farrow was held on a $150,000 bond. At the time of their arrest, neither of the defendants made any public statements or entered an immediate plea. In January 2021, more than 8 years after Clarence Biddle vanished, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania formally brought criminal charges against both Reba Biddle and Randall Farrow. The trial was held jointly, with both defendants seated separately in the same courtroom, each represented by independent legal counsel. The prosecution, led by Assistant District Attorney Rachel Morrow, based its case on 4 core components: the forged letter mailed to the Biddle residence in November 2012, the forensic evidence recovered from the backyard shed, the inconsistencies in the timeline Reba provided regarding Clarence's disappearance, and the unauthorized possession of Clarence's vehicle by Farrow. In her opening statement, ADA Morrow spoke plainly to the jury. This was not a disappearance. This was a staged erasure. A man's life was ended, and in its place, a narrative was built to serve financial and personal gain. According to prosecution's theory, Reba lured Clarence into the shed early on the morning of October 12, 2012, under the pretense of helping him load gear for his hunting trip. There, a confrontation occurred that turned fatal. While the state did not attempt to present a definitive cause of death, the physical evidence, blood spatter, DNA, and concealment, supported the claim that a violent event had taken place. As for motive, prosecutors presented financial records showing the couple was drowning in debt, over $28,000 in unsecured liabilities by mid-2012. That financial strain, combined with the $60,000 life insurance policy Reba collected after Clarence's disappearance, became the foundation of the motive theory presented to the jury. The trial was far from over, but what had begun as a puzzling missing person case was now unfolding into a dark tale of deception, murder, and betrayal, one that had remained buried for nearly a decade. The verdict: justice for Clarence Biddle. As the trial unfolded, witness testimony painted a clearer picture of what had been happening in the weeks leading up to Clarence Biddle's disappearance. Multiple individuals confirmed an emerging relationship between Reba Biddle and Randall Farrow during that same period. One particularly compelling testimony came from Denise Halpern, a co-worker of Reba's. Under oath, Halpern recalled a conversation that took place just weeks before Clarence vanished. In it, Reba confided that she felt trapped in her marriage and was waiting for a way out. Halpern also testified that Reba had mentioned someone new she was beginning to see, though she did not identify the man by name at the time. The prosecution's forensic evidence was equally compelling. Crime scene analyst Mark Callister testified that the blood spatter found inside the shed showed a medium-velocity impact pattern, consistent with blunt force trauma. He also noted signs of an attempted cleanup, with luminol revealing traces of blood on multiple surfaces. DNA analysts further confirmed that a strand of hair found at the scene belonged to Clarence Biddle, and that blood samples collected matched genetic markers from his maternal lineage. One of the most crucial elements of the prosecution's case was a letter initially believed to have been sent by Clarence from Buffalo, New York. This letter had long supported the theory of a voluntary disappearance. But in court, a handwriting expert testified that the letter bore strong similarities to several handwritten drafts found in Reba's apartment. Furthermore, ink analysis revealed that the letter had been written using pens previously ordered through Reba's workplace. Jurors were shown side-by-side images of the mailed letter and an unfinished draft, both nearly identical, with only minor syntax differences. This comparison was central to demonstrating that the Buffalo letter was a fabrication, meant to support a false narrative. Randall Farrow declined to testify in his own defense, remaining largely silent throughout the proceedings. His attorney argued that Randall had no involvement in Clarence's disappearance and had been unaware of the vehicle's origin when he began driving it. The defense portrayed Farrow as a passive participant, someone who had been drawn in after the fact, not a key conspirator. Reba's defense team leaned heavily on the argument that no direct evidence of homicide existed. They emphasized that no body had ever been recovered, no cause of death confirmed, and no murder weapon presented. Her attorney claimed Clarence had voluntarily left, and that Reba had simply tried to rebuild her life in the years that followed. As for the handwritten letter drafts, the defense argued they were part of Reba's emotional coping process, not proof of forgery or deceit. But the jury found these arguments unconvincing. After 3 weeks of testimony and just 6 hours of deliberation, the panel returned with a unanimous verdict. On March 12, 2021, Reba Biddle was found guilty on all counts: conspiracy to commit murder, insurance fraud, and obstruction of justice. Randall Farrow was found guilty of being an accessory to fraud and tampering with physical evidence. Both were taken into custody immediately following the verdict, with no bond granted. Outside the courthouse, Clarence's sister, Lisa Biddle, addressed the media briefly. They told the world he walked away. Now, the truth has walked back in. On April 14, 2021, sentencing was handed down in Luzerne County Court. Reba Biddle received a 25-year sentence in a Pennsylvania State Correctional Facility, with no eligibility for parole for the first 17 years. Judge Celia Horton, delivering the sentence, emphasized the calculated, cold-blooded nature of Reba's actions, especially her deliberate efforts to conceal Clarence's presumed death and benefit financially from his disappearance. Randall Farrow was sentenced to 14 years for his role in conspiracy. Although the court acknowledged that Farrow had not been charged with direct involvement in Clarence's death, Judge Horton made it clear that his long-term participation in the cover-up, including his use of Clarence's vehicle and his efforts to mislead investigators, demonstrated a clear and willful complicity in maintaining a fraudulent and damaging lie. With both Reba and Randall behind bars, the nearly decade-long mystery of Clarence Biddle's disappearance had finally reached its somber conclusion. Justice, though long delayed, had at last arrived. No body, no murder charge, but justice still found a way. Despite the overwhelming weight of forensic and circumstantial evidence, no murder charge was ever filed against Reba Bidd or Randall Farrow. The absence of Clarence Bidd's body remained the single most significant barrier. During sentencing, prosecutors explained that without human remains or confirmed cause of death, securing a homicide conviction was legally unfeasible. Instead, both convictions were based on conspiracy to commit murder, insurance fraud, evidence tampering, and obstruction of justice. These charges were upheld through the extensive evidence presented during trial, including forensic findings and false documentation. In June 2021, Clarence Bidd was officially declared deceased by court order in Susquehanna County, allowing his legal and financial affairs to be formally closed. A private memorial service was held in Montrose, attended by his family, former co-workers, and members of IBW Local 1249, the union he had belonged to for years. His sister, Lisa Bidd, delivered a powerful eulogy. They buried the truth for 8 years, but now he gets his name back. Her words were later quoted in local news, which described the case as one of Pennsylvania's most complex cold case convictions in recent memory. In partnership with IBW Local 1249, a portion of the recovered insurance funds was used to establish a scholarship in Clarence's name. The fund, designed to support second career electricians, received its first round of applicants in early 2022. Reba Bidd is currently serving her sentence at the State Correctional Institution at Muni in Lycoming County. She is ineligible for parole until 2038. Randall Farrow is serving his term at SCI Bennett Township in Center County. A court order strictly prohibits any communication, direct or indirect, between the two for the duration of their incarceration. Clarence's body has never been found. Multiple official and private searches have failed to locate a burial site or any physical evidence conclusively tied to his remains. law enforcement has not announced any ongoing search operations. As of 2024, his remains are still missing. His 1999 Ford F-150, the vehicle he was last seen driving, remains in state custody. Weathered by time, repainted and stripped of plates, it sits in a secured evidence facility in Scranton, a silent witness to a case built not on confession, but careful reconstruction and pursuit of truth.